ceasefire, at least temporarily being respected. Robert, you voiced legitimate, in my view, sincere concerns. For anybody who says he overreacted because it ended well, I'll say, since we're going like religious on it, it ended well because he voiced his concerns. So I'll flip it around on its head. But Robert, what is your take of what happened in the last week and where it goes forward from here?
Well, we'll probably, we may never fully know the whole backstory. Maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now, different stories will leak out so that we can piece together what took place. There was obviously a move by Mark Levin and there's been now interviews by Israeli generals saying what their plan was. That was a regime change operation. That was not what President Trump was focused on, which was nuclear disarmament, and which he associated with the capacity to enrich uranium to above the 3.5% or enrich it at all. So when we last did the show on Sunday, Trump had put out that regime change tweet that got a lot of, I think it was one of the most negative reactions, most replies he's almost ever got on any truth. So to the degree he was testing out the court of public opinion, I think his voters making it clear to them that is not what they had signed up for, I think was helpful to his decision-making process. Then I think what you saw going on Monday morning, you saw a range of things that we had talked about. So some people were like, oh, Barnes must have lost a lot of money on this. It was actually just the opposite. The two picks that we had put out at sportspicks.locals.com was that there would be an attack that weekend at 8-1 odds. That those people, however you feel about betting on those things, they did quite well with that prediction, and that we would have a ceasefire before the end of July. Put that out at 5-1, got both. So in terms of what we thought would happen, did in fact happen. Which was ultimately, I think, a good outcome as long as we don't get dragged back into it. You look at what happened on Monday morning, and you could put together some tea leaves that, first of all, Iran started talking about closing off the Straits of Hormuz. And then we can talk about China in this regard. There was an effort to reach out to China. There was an assumption in the State Department, it appears, that China would never go along with Iran closing off the Straits of Hormuz because they depend so much on Iranian oil. But no such statement was forthcoming from China. It's probably not a coincidence that a trade deal was signed the very next day. It looks like China leveraged the Iranian situation along with its near monopoly on the production of rare earths to get us to lower our demand, because now basically the tariffs are only slightly higher than they were before all this started. About a 30% tariff. And we're back to giving them a whole bunch of electronic stuff that chips and other things that we'd said we weren't going to do, apparently, as part of the deal. So, but I think that the State Department's prediction of how China would react was mistaken. And instead, China used it as an opportunity to leverage a better trade deal. At the same time, the Iranian foreign affairs minister was in Moscow meeting with Putin. Putin had some brief statements that were published. And then, unlike most meetings that take place, there was no further readout from the Russian embassy about what the rest of that conversation was. Not long after that conversation is when suddenly ceasefire talks commence. Now, you can tell this by watching Trump's own reaction on his truth feed. He started off the morning complaining about oil. So obviously the Straits of Hormuz was bothering him. He's like, drill, baby, drill. We got to do it now. We shouldn't be, so he was concerned about how that could backfire on him. And this was concerns that some of us in Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, those of us that did not want a regime change in operation in Iran, didn't want us involved in a war in Iran, were warning that this was one of the dangerous potential risks that Trump faced, was the economy blowing up, right as he was trying to get his big, beautiful bill through, which we'll also be discussing tonight.
Robert, hold on. Did your mic just go wonky?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Sorry, I think it went wonky for a second, but maybe it was just me. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no problem. The little big beautiful bill outing. That's when all of a sudden, so Trump's talking about oil, and then he was talking about something else that happened over the weekend after the attack, which was Medvedev, the former president of Russia, who's tight with Putin, considered a potential successor. Still has a lot of influence, but he's kind of like, he barks loud. Is kind of his role, if you will. He put out why he thought the effort had failed, and in particular, he said other nuclear-armed countries are now going to provide their nuclear armaments, nuclear weapons to Iran.
So pause it there, because that was suggested, and I was thinking it's either a joke or a troll. Or, I mean, was there an element
Given
of
who it
serious?
was? No. Given it was Medvedev, and you know that Trump was paying attention to it because, once again, Trump truthed about it. They put out a truth post. What is this about? What is this about? So what you saw was, I think, there was some suggestions within the pro-war side that the Iran wouldn't close the Straits of Hormuz, that China wouldn't get involved, that Russia wouldn't get involved. Well, all those things were going the opposite direction on Monday morning. And I think President Trump, to his credit, recognized that these risks were coming to fruition, and that what he had been advised by some people in the State Department and others was not coming to fruition, and that this could easily get out of hand and could get out of hand fast. At the same time, Israel was losing in its war of attrition because the missiles were coming through at a much higher rate than had been suggested beforehand. And so Israel then wanted a ceasefire of its own for its own accord because it needed time at least to step back from everything. And I think now you can tell that the regime change neocon apparatus, the deep state apparatus, thought that Trump was really going to go through with regime change. And how do you know that? By various statements that they were making, Washington Post stories that came out Monday morning, New York Times stories about how that would look, how the invasion would look, how the attack would look, so on and so forth. And so the Israeli defense minister has come out and admitted that they were trying to find the Ayatollah to kill him, and that they were just being unsuccessful in doing so, but that they didn't care what Trump said. They were going to go forward with it anyway. So this could easily get out of control fast. By that point, Trump had heard from his base that was not happy with the idea of a regime change conflict, that Trump had seen what the Russia was stepping in and stepping up. China was stepping in and stepping up in ways that were counterproductive for their agenda. And he's like, this could get out of hand fast. And to Trump's credit, immediately got on the phone with the Qataris and said, I can get Israel with a ceasefire. Can you get Iran with a ceasefire? And the Iranians said yes. And then agreed to have a very light for show attack on a U.S. base in Qatar that was empty, that we were given advance notice of the attack. And that's it. And hopefully that's where it stays. The big question is, does it stay there? Long-term impact on nuclear nonproliferation will be an ongoing debate. Whether it was a wise attack or not will be an ongoing debate. But as long as President Trump keeps us out and from these Middle Eastern ongoing conflicts and other wars, then it will be an achievement rather than a detriment for him. The key is he made the right decision at the right time when it was clear that the negative signs were coming in of how this could easily get out of hand, and that his own base had no interest in a regime change war. That's when he made the right decision. Or even published statements saying don't attack Israel, was very critical, use the F word. You could actually bet on that, by the way, whether Trump would use the F word this month. And he did in an interview. You can see the little baby version. They got a baby meme version of Trump saying of doing it, which is even funnier. But clearly he realized he had to hem Israel in quickly because this was not working as regime change. I don't think Trump ever had any real interest in regime change. Some would say that maybe he put that truth out simply to motivate the Iranians to come to the table on a ceasefire, or he did it to test out what his audience thought and felt about the issue. But either way, and then here's how you really know that the regime change was going to happen, or they thought it would happen. The neocon, the deep state apparatus, Lindsey Graham had prepared for his lecture of a lifetime, his Winston Churchill moment, his Abraham Lincoln moment, by going to the Senate floor with his big plan of why we have to go in there and why we have to do it and why regime change is required. And he had his big little boards and his little demonstratives, as we say in the courtroom. And right as he stepped off the stage, he finds out that Trump did a ceasefire anyway. Mark Levin was screaming and yelling and hooting and hollering, how, we can't do this. We can't let them out. Trump didn't care. Trump was done. Trump was finished. Trump was out. They also were probably behind the leaks, claiming that the effort was unsuccessful. We probably won't ever fully know how successful it was or wasn't. But Trump recognized right away that was an effort to continue the conflict by saying, you didn't destroy anything. You didn't hit anything. They already moved everything. It's going to come right back. Trump immediately quashed that. He's like, I don't care. You're insulting pilots. You're insulting America, so on and so forth. I'm not going to tolerate that suggestion, which means that effort to gin up the conflict all over again is dead, at least for Trump. So the key for Trump on a go-forward basis is to keep us out of any ongoing or continuous conflict and not get dragged into this again. and we'll see if ultimately he's successful in that regard.
So I pulled up a comment that said Tucker, Candace, Alex, someone else. Oh, Bannon. I don't know if Bannon was in there. Damaged themselves through this. I tend to disagree
entirely.
But
they establish their credibility as independent. They're going to give you their honest opinions, regardless. Now, Candace Owens got more credibility out of this, to be honest, and I don't think she warranted such credibility. I think she's a grifter, and I've said so for a while. I think she's the queen of the grifters. Now, I don't agree with anybody criticizing Tucker Carlson on those grounds. Tucker disclosed this week that Fox News and the Murdochs had promised him a fully funded, fully backed presidential campaign if he'd run against Donald Trump, and he refused. Tucker has shown his loyalty over and over again to his personal detriment. The same with Steve Bannon. This is a man who went to prison defending the loyalty of President Trump. Did Mark do that? I don't think he did do that, did he?
When people say who cares what Bannon thinks, and I say, first of all, the man went to jail for 4
if you want to be in that tiny little portion that nobody cares about, that will never have power in the rest of the country, have at it. Join your small little bubble, and you can pretend that you are all of the country. You can pretend you're a majority of the country, but these people are delusional. And these are the people who are trying to talk Trump into a regime change war. That would have been a disaster, unmitigated disaster. Credit to President Trump, who recognized it as soon as the warning signs started to flare. When his audience pushing back, Russia getting involved, China getting involved, these things told him, Israel bleeding out, and it's a war of attrition. He reckoned, okay, the best thing is to get out of this. I was only into this to deter nuclear weapons anyway. I wasn't in this for a regime change, really. He just spoken out against that in the Middle East just a month before in Saudi Arabia. So I think Trump made the right decision, but the loyal people who are loyal to MAGA, loyal to the country, and loyal to the president, all three, and managed to balance those loyalties out without sacrificing one for the other, is Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon. They did themselves well. They did themselves well in terms of the interest of the country and the best interest of the American people. So I think the libertarian portion of his base is going to be disappointed. They're disappointed with a lot of stuff anyway. So that vote's going to bleed out probably for him. I don't think he net added votes with this. I think he net detracted votes. But it probably did help the commie candidate for mayor of New York, because they voted while this conflict was flaring up, and it was probably enough to push him over the top and to knock Cuomo out of being the Democratic nominee.
Hold on, before we get there, Robert, the one thing I was going to say is I would say maybe the people who, I say not lose credibility, but who made points that were incorrect from the get-go, is that, America is Israel's bitch, to put it crassly, like some people are saying. I can understand people saying, well, maybe America is being dragged into conflict as a result of Netanyahu's zealous aspirations for regime change in Iran. But I've never heard a president talk to or about Israel the way Trump did. And I've got nothing, I say nothing for, nothing against, just as a pure matter of fact, to hear Trump say, I'm mad at Israel. Like, it was at a moment where he didn't have to single out Israel, because he could have said Iran's violating the ceasefire. He said Israel's doing it. They don't know what the F they're doing. And I had never heard anybody really put Netanyahu in his place like that. And to me, it really confirmed the idea that Netanyahu was trying to drag America into this regime change conflict through its intempestuous or preemptive strikes. And Trump said, this is how it's going to end, Israel. And if you don't come to the table, you're on your own, and Godspeed and God bless. What do you say about that interpretation of these events?
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. So I think that, and now he's trying to bail out Bibi from his other legal troubles, that to a degree, Bibi or others may have thought a continued conflict with Iran would delay those trials. And so I think that's part of the reason why he's, people have been critical of some of his very, very pro-Bibi Netanyahu statements concerning these trials, but I think it's payback in part because he shut down the effort to have this war continue. He shut down the effort to make it a regime change war. And so I think that now he still may be a little bit naive about where he thinks certain things are going to develop from here, but we'll see. He was talking about Iran joining the Abraham Accords and things like that. That's not on the eve of happening, I don't think. But we'll see. But I think but when push came to shove, he did listen to his audience. He did listen to his voters. That Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson were consistently relaying the message, Marjorie Taylor Greene and others as well. But on top of that, and people on Truth and people, the Richard Barris was influential in this regard. Others were just laying out all the risks. And the problem was the people pushing regime change were mitigating the risks and elevating the promises of success. And their promises of success were overstated, and their statements of risk were understated. And as he saw those of us who were warning about the risk, saw those risks start to come to fruition in live time, the great credit to Trump is when he acts on his instincts, he tends to make very good decisions. When he goes away from his instincts is when he makes poor decisions. And here, when he was came to shove, he let his instincts take over. People like Vice President Vance were advancing this position from day one. He's trying to create an intellectual architecture from the nature of the attack to say, here's a manageable policy on a go-forward basis, which is to have limited goals and objectives, and then to get out once those limited goals and objectives are reached. And I think Vance handled himself very well in this context. Once Trump had made the decision to attack, he made sure it was targeted and tailored just to the nuclear facilities, and then we would get out as soon as we could. And that when the risk started to mount, and Trump saw that those of us warning about the risk were right, then he operated on his instincts, made the right decision to get us out. And Netanyahu, and it will still be no greater. There might be greater, but and no sweeter moments than the fact that Lindsey Graham walked off that Senate floor thinking he was walking out to a hero's welcome in the announcement of another Churchillian war, to be told the war's already over, pal. So that was a sweet moment for a comeuppance for the nutty neocons, and hopefully we don't get back here during the rest of Trump's term to have to worry about this.
Touch wood.